Cliff Burton sets down his Rickenbacker bass and stares at the studio glass when the producer's voice cuts through the intercom like a knife. "Turn down that bass, kid." This isn't a bass solo album. What happens in the next 2 minutes doesn't just save the recording session, it creates the sound that will define heavy metal for the next 40 years. Sweet Silence Studios, Copenhagen, Denmark, September 1986. 2:47 a.m. The air inside Studio A is thick with cigarette smoke and the metallic smell of overworked amplifiers that have been pushed beyond their breaking point for 14 straight hours. Red recording lights cast everything in an apocalyptic glow, making the studio look like the inside of a spaceship hurtling toward destruction. Coffee cups grow cold on every available surface, forgotten in the heat of artistic creation. Ashtrays overflow with the remnants of countless Marlboro Red cigarettes, each one a small sacrifice to the gods of inspiration. The floor is littered with crumpled lyric sheets, covered in James's illegible handwriting, empty Heineken bottles, guitar picks worn smooth, and the general debris of artistic warfare. This is hour 14 of what was supposed to be an 8-hour session, but time has no meaning when you're chasing perfection. But nobody's complaining about the overtime costs or the exhaustion that weighs on their shoulders like lead blankets. They're here to make history. They're here to record the album that will either launch Metallica into the stratosphere alongside their heroes or prove that they're just another flash-in-the-pan metal band from San Francisco, destined to fade into obscurity like so many others who thought they had what it takes to change the world. Studio A is a cathedral of sound, a temple dedicated to the worship of sonic perfection. 30-foot ceilings designed to capture every overtone, every harmonic, every subtle nuance of musical performance. The walls are lined with rare Brazilian rosewood that's been acoustically treated to mathematical perfection, each panel positioned with the precision of a master craftsman. Microphones that cost more than most people's cars hang from boom stands positioned with surgical precision throughout the room. Neumann U87S, AKG C414S, Shure SM57S, each one a weapon in the war against mediocrity. This isn't just a recording studio, it's a laboratory for sonic experimentation, a place where sound waves are dissected, analyzed, and reconstructed into something that transcends mere music and becomes art. The mixing console that Fleming commands is a marvel of German engineering, a Neve 8078 with enough faders, knobs, and switches to control a small country's power grid. Each channel strip represents thousands of dollars of research and development, each EQ section capable of sculpting sound with the precision of a neurosurgeon's scalpel. This is the nerve center of the operation, the place where raw musical energy gets transformed into the polished product that will eventually reach millions of ears around the world. Metallica is recording their third album, the make-or-break record that will determine whether they join the pantheon of metal legends or become a cautionary tale about bands that peaked too early. Kill 'Em All got them noticed by the underground metal scene in 1983, proved they could write thrash that hit harder and faster than anything coming out of Los Angeles or New York. It was raw, aggressive, unpolished, the sound of 4 young men with something to prove and nothing to lose. But it was recorded on a shoestring budget in a small studio that couldn't quite capture the earth-shaking power of their live performances. Ride the Lightning in 1984 was the quantum leap that caught the attention of major record labels, music journalists, and musicians around the world. It proved they weren't just another loud band from the Bay Area with fast guitars and attitude, they were artists with something important to say. Songwriters who could craft epics like Fade to Black, and for whom the bell tolls that combined technical virtuosity with emotional depth that previous thrash metal had never achieved. But this album, this one has to be perfect. This one has to prove that 4 guys from San Francisco can compete with the biggest metal bands in the world, compete with Iron Maiden, who just released Somewhere in Time and are selling out arenas across Europe, compete with Judas Priest, who defined what heavy metal guitar should sound like for an entire generation. Compete with Black Sabbath, who invented the genre in a Birmingham basement 15 years ago and still cast a shadow over everything that follows in their wake. This album has to prove they belong in that conversation, that they're not just the next big thing, but the lasting thing. The pressure in the room is suffocating, like trying to breathe at high altitude. You can feel it in the way James Hetfield's jaw clenches when he plays the same riff for the 100th time, searching for a perfection that might not exist, but that he refuses to stop pursuing. You can hear it in Lars Ulrich's drumming, which has gotten more precise and more desperate with each passing hour, every beat carrying the weight of their collective dreams and fears. You can see it in Kirk Hammett's eyes, the way he stares at his guitar like it holds all the secrets he's ever wanted to unlock, like it contains the key to proving he deserves to be here among these titans of the metal world. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just another album, this is the record that will define their legacy, that will determine whether their names get carved alongside the greats or forgotten in the footnotes of metal history. The record company executives are waiting, the music press is watching. The fans who've supported them through the underground days are hoping they don't sell out or lose the edge that made them special in the first place. James sits in the corner, his white Flying V Explorer across his lap, picking at the opening riff of Master of Puppets for the 1000th time. His voice is shot from screaming vocals all day, reduced to a raspy whisper. His fingers are bleeding from the strings, wrapped in medical tape. His blonde hair hangs in his face, damp with sweat. He won't stop. Can't stop. This album means everything to him. As the primary songwriter, the driving force behind what Metallica is becoming, Lars sits behind his drum kit like a man possessed, his drumsticks worn down to splinters. His hands are covered in blisters that have popped and reformed so many times they look like topographical maps. The snare drumhead has been replaced 3 times today, but he can't ease up. This is the album that has to prove a Danish kid who moved to America can hang with the best drummers in the world. His Tama drums gleam under the studio lights, the bass drum tuned so low it sounds like thunder, the snare tuned so tight it cracks like gunshots. Kirk stands by his Marshall stack, guitar hanging from his shoulder like a weapon he's still learning to master. His solos are getting tighter, more dangerous with each take, the kind that make other guitarists quit playing. But Kirk carries the weight of replacing Dave Mustaine, the original lead guitarist who was kicked out. Every solo has to justify that decision. Every note has to prove that choosing musicianship over mayhem was right. His black hair falls to his shoulders, and he constantly pushes it out of his eyes with the same nervous gesture he's had since learning guitar in his San Francisco bedroom. But it's Cliff Burton who dominates the room. 24 years old, 6'1", with long black hair hanging like curtains around his face. Bell-bottom jeans that were out of style before he was born, but on him they look like a statement of independence. A denim jacket covered in patches from bands nobody's heard of: Merciful Fate, Venom, Diamond Head. His Converse sneakers held together with duct tape and determination. His Rickenbacker bass hangs low, almost to his knees. Not for style but function. That position gives him the reach and angle needed to make the bass do things basses weren't designed to do, to make it sing and scream and growl like a wounded animal. The bass itself is a 4001 model, creamy white with black pickguard, looking like it's been through a war. Dings and scratches cover the body, each one a battle scar from countless hours of practice. Behind him, a wall of amplifiers rises like a monument to power. 2 4x12 Marshall cabinets stacked on 2 more, creating a wall of speakers that could level a building. Scattered across the floor, Morley effects pedals positioned like landmines, a wah-wah pedal worn smooth from use. A distortion box that sounds like it's powered by controlled anger refined into art, but the real weapon isn't his equipment, it's his musical education. Classical training, absorbed from age 6 through 18, piano lessons that taught him harmony and counterpoint, music theory that most rock musicians avoid, but Cliff embraced as the foundation for building something unprecedented. He can read music, he can write arrangements, he understands why certain progressions create emotional responses, but now everything has stopped. The music, the energy, the creative momentum. Because the producer just said something that sucked all the oxygen out of the air. Turn down that bass. Fleming Rasmussen sits behind the mixing board like a king on his throne, surrounded by banks of faders and knobs controlling every aspect of what the microphones capture. 35 years old, Danish, expensive glasses, perfectly styled blonde hair, black sweater from some high-end Copenhagen boutique. He's produced Rainbow's Difficult to Cure, Dio's holy diver, miters, vain sold millions, and defined metal for a generation. He knows what sells, what radio wants, what labels demand. In Fleming's experience, Cliff's bass is too loud, too aggressive, too present. It's pushing the guitars aside, demanding attention, refusing to stay in the background where bass belongs. Bass is foundation. It makes everything else sound bigger, but it's not supposed to be the star. Fleming leans into the small black microphone, connecting him to the recording room. His voice is calm, professional, but with steel underneath. "Cliff, I need you to turn down your amp. The bass is overwhelming the guitars. This is a guitar-driven band, not a bass showcase. The bass should be felt, not heard. What you're playing is technically impressive, but it's not serving the song." The room goes dead quiet, the kind of silence that feels dangerous. James stops playing mid-riff. Larka's sticks freeze above his snare. Kirk unplugs his guitar with a sharp electronic pop. Everyone looks at Cliff, waiting to see how he'll respond to what amounts to a direct challenge to his artistic vision. This isn't just about volume. This is about philosophy. About what metal should sound like when it evolves. About whether bass players are musicians with something important to contribute, or just rhythm section. About whether Cliff Burton is an artist with revolutionary vision, or just a sideman who's gotten too big for his britches. The tension is suffocating. The weight of everything they've worked for hangs in the balance. The Elektra Records deal that could make them millionaires. The tour dates already booked. The growing expectations from a metal community watching to see if Metallica can deliver. Cliff doesn't move for what feels like an eternity. Doesn't reach for his volume knob, just stands there, hair covering his face. The silence stretches. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then he speaks, quiet but carrying throughout the room with authority. "What if I could show you something? 2 minutes. If you don't like what you hear, if you think it doesn't serve the music, I'll turn down. I'll play exactly what you want for the rest of this session. But give me 2 minutes to show you what this bass can do when it's allowed to breathe." Fleming looks skeptical. He's dealt with prima donna musicians before, lead guitarists who think every song needs a 5-minute solo, drummers who want cannons for snare drums, singers who think they're the second coming of Robert Plant. But there's something different about Cliff's request. This isn't ego, this is conviction. Someone who genuinely believes he has something important to contribute. Fleming sighs, checks his expensive Swiss watch. 2 minutes. But if this is just showing off, we're done for the night. Cliff nods once. He reaches down to his effects pedals, not to turn down volume, but to engage the wah-wah. The sound that emerges isn't bass as anyone understands it. It's something else entirely, living in the space between rhythm and melody, between thunder and lightning. He starts with the main riff of Master of Puppets, played on bass, an octave lower than James plays it. But it's not just lower, it's deeper, more primal, like the earth cracking open to reveal molten core. The wah-wah gives the bass a voice that's almost human. James starts playing along instinctively, but his guitar sounds thin compared to what pours from Cliff's amplifier stack. The bass isn't competing with guitar, it's completing it, showing what guitar could be with courage to be more than power chords. Then Cliff does something that makes everyone stop breathing. He starts playing harmony, not just root notes. Bass players are supposed to play actual harmony lines, complex classical progressions, weaving in and out of the main melody like smoke through forest. Fleming's hand moves toward the bass fader, but instead of pulling it down, he pushes it up. What he's hearing isn't just bass line, it's orchestration, it's arrangement. It's the difference between a song and a symphony. 1 minute passes, Cliff's playing becomes more complex, more dangerous. Classical fingerpicking combined with metal aggression, jazz fusion sophistication mixed with punk attitude. It shouldn't work, but it does. The room transforms. What was cold, sterile space becomes alive with sound that seems to come from everywhere. The bass isn't just from amplifiers, it's in the walls, the floor, the bones of everyone listening. James stops playing altogether. Mesmerized as his bass player redefines what the instrument can do. This isn't showing off, this is revelation. Lars starts playing along quietly, then with growing confidence. not trying to dominate rhythm, but following Cliff's lead, letting bass dictate the pulse. 2 minutes becomes 3. Fleming never calls time. He's too busy adjusting levels, finding perfect balance, realizing he's witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. When Cliff finally stops, the silence is different, full of possibilities, understanding, respect. Fleming leans into the microphone, voice changed. Authority still there, but wonder now. That wasn't a bass line. That was architecture. That was foundation that allows everything else to exist. Cliff nods, quiet, humble but vindicated. That's what I've been trying to tell people. Bass doesn't have to be invisible. It can lead. It can create space for other instruments to be better than they thought possible. Fleming starts adjusting the mix. Instead of turning bass down, he's building the entire song around it. Making bass the foundation, guitars the walls, drums the roof, creating sonic architecture that never existed. Let's try Master of Puppets again. From the top, Cliff, you lead. Everyone else follows. What happened next changed everything. For the first time in metal history, bass became equal to guitars, not supporting them, complementing them, creating sound bigger, fuller, more complex than anyone thought possible. The session stretched until sunrise. Not because they struggled, but because they discovered every song became experiment. Every take revealed new possibilities. Battery became showcase for Cliff's classical training. Sanitarium featured bass melodies more memorable than guitar parts. Disposable Heroes turned into conversation between all four instruments, with bass as wisest voice. But Orion, the album's instrumental, proved Cliff's point completely. 8.5 minutes with no vocals, where bass played melodies most bands would give their lead guitarist, classical progressions, jazz fusion complexity, metal aggression, flowing together like they always belonged. When Fleming played back rough mixes, nobody spoke for a minute. The sound was massive, apocalyptic, but sophisticated, power to level buildings, subtlety to make grown men cry. James broke silence. This doesn't sound like any metal album ever made. Cliff smiled. Good. Master of Puppets was released 6 months later. It didn't just succeed, it revolutionized metal. Other bands started hiring bass players who could actually play. Producers gave bass equal space in the mix. Metal became more complex, musical, sophisticated. Critics who dismissed heavy metal as noise suddenly took notice. Musicians from jazz, classical, even pop, began studying Cliff's techniques. For Cliff, real victory wasn't the album's success. It was that moment when Fleming realized bass could be more than rhythm section. 2 minutes that changed not just one producer's mind, but heavy metal's future. 3 years later, Cliff was dead, killed in a bus accident in Sweden. He was 24. In 5 years, he redefined what bass could be in metal. Not bad for a kid from Castro Valley who just wanted to play music that mattered. The day after Cliff died, Fleming was interviewed by Danish music magazine. When asked about working with Metallica, about Master of Puppets' success, Fleming only wanted to talk about 2 minutes in 1986, when a young bass player taught an experienced producer that rules were made to be broken. I've produced hundreds of albums, worked with biggest names in rock, but I'll remember those 2 minutes forever. When someone showed me there's always more to learn, that experience means nothing if you're not open to being surprised. Fleming never again told a bass player to turn down. Instead, he'd ask them to show him something he'd never heard. Some couldn't, but a few could. Those were always the albums that mattered. In 2019, Master of Puppets was inducted into Grammy Hall of Fame. The citation mentioned the album's revolutionary use of bass as lead instrument and its influence on generations of metal musicians. At the ceremony, James was asked about Cliff's contribution. Cliff didn't just play bass on Master of Puppets, he taught us how to hear music differently, how to leave space for each other to be great. The 2-minute conversation with Fleming changed everything. Today, bass players worldwide study Cliff Burton's techniques. Music schools teach courses on his harmony approach. His Rickenbacker is displayed in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But real legacy isn't in techniques or awards, it's in understanding that art happens when someone's brave enough to say, "What if?" Instead of, "This is how it's always been done," 2 minutes in a recording studio. 2 minutes that changed metal forever. 2 minutes proving sometimes the best way to serve music is to refuse to turn down. When someone tells you to turn down, to play small, to follow everyone else's rules, remember Cliff Burton in that Copenhagen studio. 2 minutes of conviction can echo for decades. The most important moments happen when you trust your vision more than their expectations. What would you refuse to turn down? What 2 minutes are you waiting to claim? Somewhere, someone needs to hear what you have to say at full volume. Don't disappoint them by playing it safe. Turn it up.